unload their unload their materials, and then this is somehow supposed to be part of the economy. Well, I don't think that that works very well for me. It's just not true. But so the camps are formed by local groups that want to have camps. And we're just creating a network that can allow them to connect to technical information, experts, and in some cases to access funding and other support. So certain places like Somalia or um, Guatemala, these kinds of places really need quite a bit of help. And we have one group in Syria that they're actually working with a number of villages. So it's kind of dangerous to go there, but the people are there. And so through the United Nations, a partner of ours is the Gaia University. We have other partners like the Global Eco Village Network and other partners who also help out with all these things. So when we have an opportunity to make a camp because the local people say that they want to have a camp, then we start to discuss, well, what does that mean? How do we help? How can we help? Because in all these places, and especially today, just before this, I was on with the Mediterranean, Middle East, and North Africa group of camps. And so this is a group of camps which the degree of difficulty is high, but it's really satisfying to do something. Instead of saying, oh, they're a basket case, there's nothing we can do about that, but really to give them an opportunity to participate and then see, and my own experience is that we can do restoration. The problem is we're not really choosing that as the central intention for human civilization. We really need to realize that there is nothing more valuable right now than restoration. So my answer to your question is we have to restore all degraded lands on the earth. Anybody who understands that, we should support and help to do that.
Yeah. Thank you. I guess there's a question of the ownership of land and who's in control of the land. For instance, and this also ties into the big question for our attendees in the US and mostly in the Northeast, I think, although this did go out nationally on Facebook to my friends at least, because we are on the computer. In New York City, they are trying to become supposedly trying to become flood resilient, and there's a lot of history, a lot of background, but they just destroyed a park or a third of a 46-acre park, took down all of the trees, all of the landscaping. Yes, it's awful. And so the city, yeah, yes. So that land needs to now be restored, for instance, um, and especially because New York City is a model for the world, and the question of ownership and access to degraded land in New Jersey, where most of us are, I think. We have a lot of parking lots and vacant buildings. That's our degraded land, I think. And certainly people here today can financially support this movement for restoration, can participate in Kentucky, or I believe also South Carolina has a camp. Um, but in terms of, well, in terms of working locally and the question of access to land. And I see we do have some hands coming up and comments in the chat, but
Well, just quickly, let me just say that personally, I think we have to have a collective, we have to have a collaborative inquiry for collective intelligence. It's not up to anybody to decide for everybody else. I mean, I can decide what I do, and everybody can decide what they're going to do. But if we study together and we consider these things together in an open way, then we can actually gather a collective intelligence about what we collectively believe. I've seen this work very well in Mongolia and some other places. They have what's called the Ural, the Hural. And the Hural is so wonderful because all the Mongolians, they never talk to each other because they live out and they're very quiet. But when they show up together, they're really showing off because the young people are looking for mates and everything. But they don't talk very much. But it also reminds me a little bit of Quaker meeting. And when you have this silence, it's interesting to break the silence. You really need to think, what are you going to say? It's embarrassing if you're just going to babble in a profound moment. So no one wants to do that. And then when something is said, it's really very important. And it's really nice if the whole group can come up. And what the Mongols do is they come and everybody has a chance to say whatever they want, but very few will speak. But if someone speaks, then without having to argue or have anything, you sort of, after a little bit of consideration, somehow you can feel how the people feel about this idea. And so some of them will be thinking, well, I don't know, that's not really perfect. And so then it's kind of that just shuts down. But then somebody else says something and everybody goes, oh yeah, that's kind of, oh. And at some point, the whole group understands. There was a word, grok. Anybody read those old Ray Bradbury books? Stranger in a strange land to grok. And so at some point, the whole group of Mongols quietly sitting around looking at each other and, they know. And then they just leave. And they know what they're going to do, and they come back next year to the Hural. But they have decided as a group, that's what I think we need to do, create this kind of collective intelligence, act as not just as individuals, but as a meta-organism. I see Karen. Karen, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, yes, my name's Karen Birmingham Eden. How are you? Can you hear me okay, or am I echoing? Oh, you can hear me. Very good.
I can hear you, yeah.
In regards to environmental pollution in segregated or overpopulated areas, on one hand, I understand we're talking about lands where people own lands and it's been over processed. In the case of America, when we have a overpopulation because of segregation, such as in Black communities, would you agree that if with reparations was distributed to African Americans, by them not being able to buy homes, now being able to buy homes to move out in a more not just a micro but a macro area where they can like spread out, would that help, or could you see that as part of the case of reparations? I know this doesn't have to do exactly with the renewal cycle that you're using now in regards to taking land that's non-plentiful, make it plentiful again. And I just think that as on in a national issue, besides what's happening in Kentucky, but what's happening right in urban areas or cities, do you think the argument for reparations could be supported with ecological findings?
Well, I think I want to just go back a little bit to the ownership question, since I don't think that's fully, we need to explore that a little further. Personally, I believe that stewardship is a better word than ownership, because frankly, I'm looking at 70. So I'm going to be 70 years old, and I don't intend to live forever. And I think that it's very difficult to actually own the earth, because I'm going to give up my body, and so ownership is a different sort of a thought. And stewardship, though, I think we have a responsibility to be very nurturing and careful to make sure that future generations have a fully functional earth system. So it's not, and frankly, having studied this for 3 decades, we're in a very serious situation with degradation. So vast areas of the planet are massively degraded. We don't have simply CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions. We have disruptions to Earth's systems on a planetary scale, and they are nearing collapse. So we need to really understand what this means, and we can't just talk about it, because they're not theoretical problems, they're physical problems. And the physical problems of, say, African Americans are, of course, extremely important, but there's also the issues of the Native Americans who were there in the very beginning, and then there's everybody else, because I feel like in South Africa, in Rwanda, in some of the other places where I've worked, I've observed the truth and reconciliation concept. And this is a very powerful way to have a deep, cathartic resolution to some things. It's almost like closure, or and if we really understand these problems, we have to realize that basically everybody's a victim. The people who are dominating or suppressing or using violence, they're victims too, and they're losing their souls. And of course, they're inflicting terrible pain against people who are innocent people, but both are victims. And so, how can we get to a new level where some of these historical problems, like in the Middle East where we're working, you see these problems that go back thousands of years. And I don't think they remember why. They hate the other group. And also, if you look at them, they are identical. They're like brothers. So if you look at their faces, you can't tell the difference. And you think, oh, this is, one brother killed another brother. And, there's that, and there's no resolution for it over in the first generation, and then stewardships after that, and generations and generations after that. And if we don't answer these things and we pass them to the next generation, then it just compounds the error. So I wouldn't make a personal thing about like reparations. I think we might want to talk about universal basic income. We might want to talk about the fact that all human beings are equal. I mean, how is it that there are billionaire class emerging and then there's billions of poor people? You know, so you have a few billionaires and billions of poor people. Well, that's not really wealth. That's mass poverty.
If I could just say really quick, and I don't mean to interrupt you, it's just that I had an opportunity to do a research paper on environmental pollution and Black populations who are vulnerable to segregation, overpopulation, uh, which breeds other dissatisfactory factors. But a majority of children are not born with asthma. They're not born with bronchitis. It has to do that's in the environment. And I live in an environment where I would walk down the street and you could taste the metal, for recycling places. And it just so happens where the elementary school is. And it just so happens where majority of people are living. And so when I read those facts, I took a different look at pollution. On one hand, when you're talking about the Serengeti and other areas where there's a vast land expansion, but when we're talking about here in America, we have children who end up suffering from this impact of environmental pollution, secondary pollution, and no one's really talking about that. That's another aspect of why Black folks are looking really seriously at this thing because the injustice has rolled over each year, each generation, and that affects us in a profound way. So yeah, so I see where you're coming from, like in the Middle East and other areas. But here in America, it seems like it also not just affects the environment, it can be used to affect certain people. I mean, look at Detroit with the water situation. And that's all
Absolutely.
I'll say. I want to hear your feedback, and I like what I hear.
I totally agree with what you're saying, and I think that it's not up to me as an individual to decide. But what's really interesting is to have a profound and nuanced conversation. I think this is the best case for the ecosystem restoration camps, because I've been involved with these big international discussions with international agencies and so on. They're not doing anything. They're just I mean, their white wine and olive budget is higher than most camps need to get started and to do real work. So what we need to do is have these conversations, and we have to, one of the things that I noticed is maybe we don't need to ask permission. Maybe we have the duty, the responsibility to restore Earth systems. And so we don't need to ask, we just need to organize and do it. And when we do it, the benefit comes to the people. And it also, we need to realize that there may be some very, very serious changes on the horizon. We're in the middle of a transformation. The climate impacts are intense, but they're also connected to the economic thinking and the political actions that are taking place. So what I've been recommending to the camps movement and to anybody who will listen is we need to get central kitchens and creator spaces available to help and to serve everybody. And we have to stop talking about monetization or ownership of things. We need to share. And, just with central kitchens and negotiating directly with the producers of organic and nutrient-rich food and buying directly could mean that we don't have any packaging. We don't have so much trash and waste. And we have the lowest price, and the producers can get the highest amount of money because they don't have to sell to the wholesale system. They can get the money directly from the people. And in that way, the community can say, well, nobody in our community is hungry. If you're hungry, come on, come over here and we'll feed you. And let's work together to make sure everybody's fed, that there's 100% employment in a way. I mean, I don't have a job, but I have work forever. I mean, I'll never be done. So, uh-oh, somebody had their hand up and then disappeared. Oh, it's Nancy. Nancy, you had your hand up. Nancy? Where did Nancy go?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but you're jumping
Okay,
around.
great.
You've changed your position. Okay.
Oh, I don't know how that happened.
I think it's
I I applaud your work and I applaud everything that you're doing. But, here we are in New Jersey in one of the most densest states. So what can we do both locally as well as work that we can do to aid people that are out in the camps? One thing I think of here in our small little town of 12,500 people is that, when you enter the town, you have these two abandoned gas stations, which I personally think could be just take off the pervious surface and create like a mini forest or a mini garden as such. But, I also think about, okay, well, that's nice. It will have some impact, but what about the people in the camps and the people who are more adversely impacted and in need of help with reforestation than we are?
well, that's thank you for that. That's very interesting. I would be very worried about places where gas stations have been, just because the level of toxic chemicals could be really intense.
Right.
So very possibly forests would be the best idea
Yes.
as opposed, and maybe not
Yeah.
even food.
Oh, nothing for food. No,
Yeah, yeah,
no.
yeah. So,
Yeah,
but
we're in agreement
there is something called there's mycoremediation and phytoremediation. Mycoremediation uses fungus to absorb the toxins, and phytoremediation uses plants. And if you pursue this, so imagine that I would try to consider the camps in a slightly more abstract way, because we have a camp called the Birdhouse. If you go look at the camps, ecosystem restoration camps.org, and look for the Birdhouse, it's in Hollywood. And so there are camps in Hollywood. So if you want to have a camp, you don't have to necessarily think that it's got to be in the Egyptian desert or something to have a camp. You can have a camp anywhere. And what the Birdhouse is doing is they have what they call the Soil Sponge Collective. And so they are able to transform front yards, backyards, side yards away from hardscapes, which don't infiltrate moisture, to be heavy in organic material and absorb water, and then that revegetated. And then if you have a canopy and fertile soils and total vegetation and biodiversity, you've created a microclimate. And if you make those microclimates all over the place, so instead of saying, well, I'm only going to do this in my yard, you say, hey, neighbors, hey, everybody, who wants to have their front yard or backyard or side yard or all of them transformed into a soil sponge? And when you do that, and you can see this in LA, so in wealthy parts of Los Angeles, it's total vegetation and it's quite beautiful and it's moist and cooler and it's highly vegetated. And in the other places, it's concrete and hardened surfaces with no infiltration. So what about creating camps which aren't necessarily in one place, but are groups of people who go anywhere they're needed in the region and say, okay, well, let's fix this up. That's not good. there's no way to infiltrate water, and there's no vegetation, and there's no organic material here. So in that case, the natural ecological function is gone. Well, can we change that? Of course we can. Do we need permission to change that? Probably, maybe not. Maybe, and maybe it's not that, if we take this responsibility to do restoration, I think, in my experience, the leaders, the political leaders, they come to me and they say, well, what should we do? And they're like, well, I think you should go restore everything. But if they're not willing to do that, if the people take the lead, then I think actually for sure they're going to do that, because they want your vote. They want you to be on their side, and they want to identify with success. So, and the more people who understand this, the more people who have a shared understanding and a shared intention, gradually that becomes the central intention. I think that's the key. When the central intention is, let's take care of everybody. How could there be hunger in America? That's crazy. So let's not do that. Let's figure out how we can take care of everyone. And that's our task. And so once we do that, what happens to those people? So if they're homeless and hungry, and now they're standing up and they're eating well and they're healthy and they're in a community and they're like, are you okay? Can we help you? What do you need? And then what can they do then? So I went to China at 26 years old, and I helped to open the CBS News Bureau. And I'll tell you, China was the poorest country you can imagine. It was just desperately poor. And they have transformed the whole of China into a superpower in 3 decades. It's 4 decades now, but it's crazy what they have been able to do. And the way they did that was they opened the creativity and the ability of people to do this. So before that, everybody was afraid and didn't want to do anything and didn't feel empowered. But they said, okay, go for it. We have to develop. It's up to you. And then they empowered all these people. It was wonderful. So I think that's what we have to do for all the refugees. Look at all these refugees all over the world. What are they doing? They're not doing anything. They're sitting there begging, please give us a meal, or we're trying to get across to Europe. What are they going to do in Europe? They're going to sleep under bridges in France or something? This isn't real. We have to go and say, look, everybody is equal. If you're alive, you have inalienable rights. You don't have to buy your rights. Nobody can take your rights away from you. But we have to have this conversation amongst everybody, and that is our decision. So anybody who comes in and says, no, you don't have rights, or my rights are better than your rights, or what are you talking about? Stop it. You're not allowed to say that, because everybody will, it would be like if you went into the doctor's office and the doctor started smoking a cigarette while everybody is sitting around there. You're like, stop. Some social pressure is needed in those cases. Tell the truth. We have to have compassion. The people who are making the most mistakes, they're suffering too. So how do we get to the point where this is one of my hardest problems, because if you see somebody who's doing ridiculous things, how do you have compassion for this person? It's easier to say, oh, you're bad, stop doing that. What are you doing? But how do you say, what's making you do that? Why are you doing that? Stop that. Didn't your mother tell you not to do that? I mean, that's where we need to be somehow, with gentle encouragement.
Right.
And especially the other thing that I would say is, now that I've been doing this for decades, I found that if people don't hear this message, if people don't do it, they don't do any restoration, at that point, I became rather frantic and upset. I really wanted people to listen to me. That is not up to me. I'm only able to do what I do. So what I realized was if I help to generate a movement of people who want to do restoration, then it's going to be attractive to more and more people to join. But if I go up to the people who are not doing it and I say, you have to restore the earth, they're like, get away. Who are you? Leave me alone.
Right.
So the important thing is, and the other thing is, personally, I want satisfaction. I want happiness. I want joy from doing this work. I don't want to be in a conflict with people who are ignorant and acting badly. I want, if you're going to be ignorant and act badly, don't come over here. You do what you're going to do, but here we're going to have fun, and we're going to make great forests and great grasslands and great coastal regions and great wetlands, and we're going to make sure everybody's fed and everybody is going to live at their highest potential. This is where I would like to be. And of course, I'm soon to be 70, so I don't have that long. So it's really not about me. It's more about the people who come after me and after all of us. We need to work in service of life. And it's not only human beings. We need to work in the service of all living things. So working only for human beings is probably a little bit part of the problem. We've thought everything was there for human beings to have, and we should be very careful with that.
John, I see there are some questions in the chat, and also Irene
you.
has her hand up. I'm so sorry, Nancy, if you were responding.
No, I'm good. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, John. I'm still here.
Are there any restoration camps in New Jersey?
I don't know of any right now. There was a group that was working on. There's a foundation that I've been connected to called One World Everybody Eats. This is a group they build restaurants that where you don't have to pay. I mean, it's basically a restaurant. You can pay if you have enough money, but if you don't have enough money, you can still go there, and it's a nice experience. It's a real restaurant experience instead of like a soup kitchen, like a here go away, or you have to listen to a sermon in order for it to get your food. You're welcome there and treated with great respect. But as I said before, camps can be started. Camps are self-organizing, self-governing, and autonomous. So if people in New Jersey wanted to have a camp, they would start one. And if they start one and they're not connected to the ecosystem restoration camps movement, that's okay. But if they start one and they're connected to the ecosystem restoration camps movement, well, we have some courses on ecosystem restoration. We have dozens of experts who have joined our advisory council. We have Zendesk has given us a place to collect all the data, and we have scientists who are doing analysis with Zurich Technical University and that sort of thing. So there are reasons to join the ecosystem restoration camps, and sometimes if there are camps that need financial help, then internationally there are a lot of people connected to the movement, and if we have a camp that needs something, we can say, well, COVID in India has caused all of the people of the untouchable class to be expelled from the cities. And so they're marching home to their home places where they left because they had no work and no opportunity there. So if the camps in India start making central kitchens, start making creator spaces, start making reforestation plans and regenerative agricultural plans for these areas, then there's something for those people who are going back to their hometowns to do. And if they need money, well, then we can ask the community around the world, like, look, how much, if we share a little bit with this group, then it will change their lives. But if we just, look at them, so if you need a camp in New Jersey, then, everybody get together, start talking about having a camp. And I put my contact information. Did everybody get that? I'll put it in once more, maybe. So you can write to me and we can talk about it. When the guy Clifford Smith in Kentucky wrote to me and he said he wanted to do this camp in Appalachia for mountaintop removal, I was, oh, please, can I come? I lived in a tent. I'm going to be 70, and I lived in a tent in 2020 for 5 months in California on Mount Shasta, and it was the best time I had for many years. So everybody can have a really good time, and we can do the right thing and help people. And then every night, play guitar around the campfire and have a really nice dinner, and every day work a few hours to do restoration. We can study. I mean, studying biodiversity. The most fun is actually to see the hydrological cycle return. So when you bring back springs or ephemeral streams, that's just wonderful.
John, there's a couple of questions from Matt in the chat. One is, I'll just read it since unless he wants to voice them, but what have you learned about scaling up public interest in the camps and pursuing the deeper ecological messages that they will learn there? So the question about changing the paradigm, it's a big question. And then he had a concrete or a sort of a nuts and bolts question. If you've had any ecological failures, how did you learn from it?
Karen, I think we're hearing if you could mute because I think I hear everybody's audio coming back to me. I don't know where it's coming from. But so wait a minute. 2 questions. One is paradigm shift.
Yeah, scaling up public interest was the phrase he used, but really it is about implementing the paradigm shift that you're talking about, the understanding of what's valuable. And that was another question from Josephine regarding the point about the misunderstanding of the value of things and that the source is more valuable than the derivatives. So getting that concept into the society.
That's one. And the second question was
is around the question of ecological failures and how you've learned from them.
Well, okay. So I'm going to take the second one first. So I was asked to film the baseline study of the restoration of the Loess Plateau by the World Bank. This is the cradle of Chinese civilization in the upper and middle reaches of the Yellow River. So it's probably most of the scientists, I'm not sure about this, but most of the scientists say it's second after settled agriculture in the Fertile Crescent. I'm not sure. They seem to be simultaneous. And by being simultaneous, it probably means they had contact with each other through that Silk Road area, and so they knew what was going on in the Mesopotamia, and the Mesopotamians knew what was going on in China. But anyway, what I realized was that when settled agriculture began in this area, the place was pristine. It was wonderful, filled with rivers and top predator, giant megafauna, huge forests, everything. And when I got there, it was just a ruin. You know, there's this nothing. There's no vegetation and no water, and the people are miserable and desperately poor. So I realized it wasn't about ecological failures, it was about dysfunctional systems. That I was studying dysfunction. So I spent a lot of time studying dysfunctional ecosystems. And as I studied these dysfunctional ecosystems, I got more and more into the, like, what is it that's happening? Okay, the microbial and fungal communities are lost. So you have no life in the organic layer. If you've lost the vegetation, each generation of life dies and gives up its body to nurture the next generation of life. And if you've lost all the vegetation, lost all the animals and all the plants, then suddenly there's no more organic material there to break down. And so you have geologic materials. So the way that the geologic materials act is that they're completely different to all the different systems. So there's a very complex scientific term, which is symbiotic, multidimensional symbiotic systems. So when you understand that you have the canopy, you have the organic layer, and you have respiration through photosynthesis, and then you have rainfall and you have solar radiation. Now, when you have all of this intact, it's functional, then you have respiration and you have a microclimate below the canopy. Now, if you lose that, what's the difference? You have solar radiation directly hitting the surface of the Earth. So the solar radiation includes UV radiation, which we use to sterilize fruit that we are sending around the world so it doesn't have any bacteria on it. So we're sterilizing the bacterial habitat, and the bacterial habitat and the microbial communities in the soil, they're the basis of the entire food web. So you can't kill the basis of the food web and not have massive activities. The other thing is the solar radiation directly hitting the surface of the Earth raises the temperatures by huge amounts. I mean, not 1.5 degrees, not 2 degrees, but like 10 degrees, 15 degrees. I even found 45 degrees in one measurement.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think his question is about in the course of restoring landscape.
Well,
I should have interrupted you.
okay.
I appreciate the summary. Yes.
All right. Well, so, you know, my studies are in dysfunction, and then afterwards into functional systems. So after learning all I could about dysfunction, I really wanted to learn about functional systems. So I've been to more than 90 countries. And so I've been to the Amazon and to Congo Basin and around the world. But so, okay, functional and dysfunctional systems. And now on his, if this question is about, do you make mistakes? Well, I would just say, be very careful, you know, and you modulate what you're doing. So the first thing you have to do is observe and study. You can't just say, and now I'm going to a new place that I've never been to before, and I'm just going to use old things that I read in books or that I thought up, and I'm just going to do that. That would not be a good idea. But if you go and you observe, then you say, well, okay, I can see that there's no organic material. Well, I can change that rapidly. I can increase the organic layer in numerous ways. And so I could say, well, do I want to bring in organic material from someplace else, or do I want to stimulate massive growth of, let's say, weirdly invasive species that will just take over and start growing all over the place, and then have a succession for these invasive plants. The plan is not like have invasive plants forever. The idea is to create organic material in the soil and then have an exit strategy for the next succession and to bring back the legacy genome. So I've seen this work in many parts of the world. This is doable. So I wouldn't say you can't, yeah, I mean, there's certain things that you cannot do, but I recommend, if you look at my academia page, there's a URL at the bottom of my address there. And if you go to the Great Green Wall of China and you look where the Chinese actually built a vegetative shelter belt through the middle of the second largest shifting sand desert in the world. That's ridiculous. I wouldn't do that, but they did it. And the fact that you can do that means we can almost do anything if we try hard. But whether we should do things, I think that's more important. I think we should go to the places which have been degraded by human beings over historical time and restore them, not go into natural systems that were always deserts, or that we have no evidence that they had anything else. And the other one about the paradigm shift. Well, I think we're at a turning point in human history. So in my experience as an old journalist, I'm looking at who, what, when, where. And when I know who, what, when, where, then I'm looking at why. So basically, when you get to why are the landscapes degraded, then there are two main factors. One is ignorance, not understanding how these systems work. And the other is greed, valuing things higher than the source of life. So we're at a turning point because we can see predictable, catastrophic, unnecessary outcomes if we continue on the same path that we're on. So unless we're hardwired to commit suicide, then we can't go there. We have to change direction. And so that means that we have to study this very carefully, and that we have to have a collective intelligence, and that human civilization has to choose to make a ecology which is functional, but also to make a society which is fair and equitable for everyone, and so that everyone's rights and everyone can participate.
Thank you. I know Karen has another question, and then there's a nice question from Leo. I don't know how long you can go with us today, but
Well,
yeah.
I'm okay until, unless you get tired of me. I mean, I'm going to be 70 years old, and I'm living alone in a studio in the middle of the Netherlands. So, although I am going to Germany tomorrow morning, but you
Well,
know,
thank
there's nobody here but me. We can talk until you're tired, or I can, of course, read a book.
Cool. Well, that's wonderful. So yeah, we'll keep going. There's other questions too, I think. So
Why don't we let Karen ask her question?
Yeah, in regards to, and you kind of touched on it, in soil that has been severely damaged. Just a little background. A lot of Black folks here in Monmouth County are directly related to First Nation tribes in the area as well. So being both survivors of chattel slavery and First Nation genocide also leads to the land and the way it's been treated. And I'm referring to the Pine Brook area where the land, where they do all the dumping. And there's been quite a controversy in the news within the last 6 months in regards to the treatment of that land. Per your theory, is it possible to help land sites such as land dumps as possibly being regenerated, or is it a lost cause?
Well, yeah, no, they're not a lost cause, but I think the question is one about time. So time is a great healer, but I actually think for dump sites, we have to recognize that this whole let's just, I mean, it goes back further, but let's go back, say, 500 years. Let's go back to, say, the 15th century, and the Catholic Church has described indigenous people as vicious savages who are not quite human, and that Christians, can subdue them and enslave them and kill them. And, so this is a justification for quite a bit of activity. And I would just add, their justification was essentially, I stole it and it's mine, which does not work as a legal precedent. So get ready for legal battles. That maybe goes back to your question about reparations, because I stole it and it's mine is not a legal argument. And we've seen in historical time, for instance, Gandhi was able to argue very forcefully that I stole it and it's mine doesn't work. And so you can't come in and say, well, I stole it and now your country is my country. What are you talking about? And so when the British, and ridiculously it was Churchill, who was a ridiculous monarchist and colonialist, he had to agree that there was no way you could get on the stage and argue that, yeah, it's okay, sorry, or we brought you civilization or whatever. How could you bring civilization to India when civilization began in India thousands of years before? What are you talking about? Doesn't make any sense. So when the arguments are so good that no one can deny them, you win. And I stole it and it's mine is definitely not a legal precedent. So there are earlier precedents which are much better.
Unless you're talking to the Supreme Court of the United States, and they will validate. They have validated what you're talking about, despite the logic and the legality, the ultimate legality of it.
Yeah, that's just not true. Then that is their problem. That's true in a temporal and corrupt way. So if you have a corrupt system, yeah, you can do anything you want with a corrupt system. But if you really want to tell the truth, you can't do that sort of thing. So now I think I've gotten off on a tangent probably. But if you're talking about dealing with highly polluted landscapes, I think what we're going to have to do is something rather more dramatic. We're going to have to have new, we're focused in our economy now in manufacturing and buying and selling things. And then we have two other aspects of this. So that's things are actually goods and services. So, but then you have speculation between the cost and price of things, and you have interest-bearing debt. Well, actually, speculation between the cost and price and interest-bearing debt, they don't really exist. They're a concept, and that's a corrupt concept which is used to enslave people. Not new, because enslaving people has been going on for a while. But what is interesting then is that we're saying that our money and our economy is from either buying and selling of goods and services, or from speculation between the cost and price and interest-bearing debt. And I heard one person recently say, if you want to improve the economy, just throw a rock through the window, because then you've got to get new glass, and somebody's got to come and put in the glass, and you got to clean it up. So, but that's really ridiculous. There's nothing there. So we need the paradigm shift is about our consciousness. Like, that's not economical. It's not economic. I make films about soil and poor people. Well, you don't make any money from films about soil and poor people. If you make a 30-second commercial for a BMW, you can make 100 times. And if you make pornography, it's probably 1,000 times. So none of that is of any use to humanity or to the earth or to our spirit or anything for any purpose. It's pollution, really. So what we need to do is understand what is valuable. And so where we are now, if we understand with the technologies we have, with our potential, if we stop focusing on manufacturing things to buy and sell, and we get rid of the corrupt speculation between cost and price and interest-bearing debt, and we treat everybody equally instead of saying, yes, it's fine, you can be a trillionaire, billionaire, you go into space in your titanium phallus or something. We don't have to do that. We can say, no, everybody is equal, and this is ridiculous. And so why don't we look at these dumps, and instead of dumping more stuff and trying to cover it over and hide it, why don't we mine those? And so this is what's going to happen it's either going to happen consciously with us, or it's going to happen in the future, because in the future they're not going to take the mountains apart. They're going to go into the dumps, and they're going to figure out how to do this. And unfortunately, they're going to find a lot of soiled plastic nappies that never biodegrade, and a bunch of other junk. But they're also going to find heavy metals, and they're going to find precious metals and things that can be used. And we need to do that just to get it out of the soil. And we have to look at and out of the water. If you can't imagine how much pollution is going in. It's going into the soil, it's going into the water, and it's going into the air. And human beings act as bivalves. We're breathing. So everything that's in the atmosphere, we're taking it into our bodies, and we're filtering it. And we're doing that with water, and we're doing that with food. And if you study extinction events, you find out that the highest risk is to the top of the food chain. Well, we're the top of the food chain, so we're the highest at risk. It's not about an owl or a toad or something. It's about the impact on all life, and the most at risk is the top of the food chain. So yes, there are lots of things which can be done. The question is, what is the intention? So if the central intention of human civilization is to restore all degraded lands on the earth, it will be done. If that's not the central intention, but we say we have to do that while having the same economic structure, the same social structure, the same mistakes over historical time, very difficult to do. But anybody who makes that choice can do it in microcosms. And when more and more people do that in microcosms and they link up, that becomes the macrocosm.
Yes, some people say it's not good to motivate people by scaring them. I don't know, because I think people are just running around burning up gasoline and buying a bunch of shit. Excuse my language, everyone, but really, right? And the governments are failing. The governments are serving the interests of those who want to continue to extract. And so it's a question, is it appropriate to point out to folks that we're out at the end of the limb and it's being sawed on? But I just wanted to relay the question from Leo about, he asked if you have any philosophers, social theorists, or religious insights that have informed your vision, your holistic vision, and may contribute to a paradigm shift.
Uh, well, I've spent quite a lot of time and energy. I've been to Tibet a number of times. I've been to India a number of times. I've been to the Middle East a number of times, and so, and to Africa and to South America and Central America and North America, and basically, I've come to the conclusion that I'm a believer in comparative religion. I think that all human endeavors seeking to understand the purpose of life and the meaning of life is valid, and that the conclusions that people have come to are their own and are fascinating. And
Are there
basically, a lot of the sacred texts kind of all say the same thing, that that everything is related, and we should all, act and we should, and we're seeking to make sense out of our lives. So I think this is what's happening, and it's happened throughout time. And my latest feeling about this is I'm a speck of cosmic dust in an infinite universe, but I'm also a unique speck of dust in an infinite universe. So yes, I think spirituality, and I think is critical to understanding.
I would say, and a very powerful speck of dust. We are conscious. So, like you are demonstrating, we have the ability to understand and then act. But anybody in particular, it doesn't have to be religious, religious text, but any authors that you have found helpful in your.
Well, many, but I think the other thing that I've come to understand is pretty much everybody is flawed. So it's not really like we're not really talking about omnipotence or perfection or something. We're talking about people who are learning. I mean, maybe I'm not right about that, because I've noticed that children are just incredibly innocent and are open to everything. Everything is just stimulation. And when newborns and young children, until they sort of get an identity, until they start saying I, then they're just open to everything. Everything is flowing through them. So I think that's kind of perfection in many ways. But I think what we're doing is balancing thought and information. So essentially, there's lots and lots of information. There are huge data sets, but when you process the information, it becomes knowledge. And when you process the knowledge, it can, it doesn't have to, but it can become wisdom if we see what that means. I mean, if we understand that by working for 6 years or to 10 years, we can bring back streams and make springs flow. Well, I think we need to kind of contemplate that a little bit, and maybe we need to do that. It's not about just contemplating it, because contemplating it will not make it appear, but doing it will.
This is towards affecting a paradigm shift, waking people up, figuring out how to connect with the consciousness where people are at. But I would just say we're all powerful. We are not omnipotent, but we are very powerful in our ability to process, like you're saying, and then act. But I'll let Stan ask his question, or go ahead, respond, please. But the question of affecting the paradigm shift. It's the they talk about the $50 million question. This is the civilizational question. But
I want to thank John for coming here. This is magnificent. You are a legend in certain circles. And well, I publish a journal, a website called Other Networks. And what we do is collect information about who's doing what. And when I was looking at regeneration and a bunch of related topics, your work came up. And there's another gentleman's,
Alan Savory.
Yes, his name came up, and so I've included your work and his and other people in my Wikidelphia, which is a local wiki for Philadelphia, and now in Other Networks, which is a effort to understand who is doing what in the world. And Other Networks is tied in, and we're here. Leo and Sarah and I and Robert are people who have been paying attention to Humanity Rising, which is a daily talk show created by the Ubiquity University. And what I would like to be able to do is to introduce you to some of the people who've been presenting, because I have created an index to all 383 episodes of Humanity Rising, and we're on our way to creating a link to each one of the presenters. There's over 1,000 presenters. I'm going to share just since Sarah has made it possible for me to share without asking permission, so I'm going to share this one screen. This is a list of the episodes of Humanity Rising that have taken on the issue of regeneration. So regeneration and the work that you're doing relates to a lot of other stuff that we have been learning about. And these are all people. So we have 86 pages on Other Networks that are tied into regeneration as a concept. And Ubiquity University has what they're calling the Global Regeneration Core, which is their effort to bring people into the process of doing regeneration and promoting it. I'm not sure how effective that has been so far, but I believe that Sarah, just today with this event, has lit the fuse for an explosion in information and issue and concern along these lines. And you being one of the two people that I know that have had particular theories for this, Savory and you are the two most prominent theories that I have run across. We need to make sure that that information gets to the people who have been presenting all these episodes of Humanity Rising. Have a whole bunch of people who have been presenting about regeneration and talking about how to do better kinds of farming and better kinds of management of land and all this stuff. It is a major focus of Humanity Rising.
Hmm.
And I would like to introduce you to Jim Garrison, who's the president of the Ubiquity University and the host and founder of Humanity Rising. And some of the other people, Jim is a key person, but he's not the major student of regeneration. His associates are more closely related to that. A bunch of people out of Costa Rica are working on these things.
Mhm.
And there's a university in Costa Rica that is actively involved with Humanity Rising and working on these issues and bringing in more and more people. So one of the things that I would do is to tour you and Sarah around the information based on all these people that we have met and start making sure that they know that you're available. Because as I
Um,
said, in certain circles, you are a hero.
huh. Okay. You have did you copy my contact information?
I have the entire chat from today because
Okay.
I'm a crazy nut that captures all the chats in the universe.
All right. Well,
So I
why
have
don't
your.
you why don't you write to me,
Mhm.
and I'll try to stay alive long enough to
You're
be
just a
helpful.
baby. I just had my 75th anniversary of being born. So, and Leo is also older than you. And so just take it easy. You're not going anywhere just yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I hope so. Um, I'm going to Germany tomorrow, but uh, uh, but yeah, we can talk about this. And I am working on. If you go to my academia page, you'll see all the films and the papers and things. But I'm working on a new podcast and two new streaming and broadcast series. One is about the last 30 years and maybe even the last 40 years of my life, um, together with my wife. Um, I hope she's still my wife because we haven't seen each other for 2 years. She's in China, and so this is a very interesting marriage to have my wife living in our home in China and I'm outside. But I got trapped outside by COVID, so I figure I'll try to be as productive as possible while I'm alive. And probably if I were in China, I'd just be resting in the hammock or something. So, but when we were young, I have all this material from going all around the world doing research, and then the other series I'm working on is called The Flourishing Path, because I'm trying to introduce, define, and reinforce the direction humanity needs to go to get off of this degraded
Mhm.
landscape, the degraded problems, and go the other way. So I'd be happy to talk to the whoever this is. What do you call it? Ubiquity?
Ubiquity University, which is the host for Humanity Rising,
Well,
which is a
send me a few
daily
links.
talk show.
Send me a few links that you think I
Okay.
should watch, and
Hmm.
then on in my email perhaps,
Hmm.
and I'd be happy to do that and happy to talk to
Yes,
the.
it's amazing that you have time to participate because what we can do is offer you more people to know about what you're doing. Certainly a few hundred, maybe a few thousand. According to Jim, who's the president of Ubiquity, tens of thousands of people will watch Humanity Rising. I have trouble believing it's that large, but it certainly is an audience that will be interested in what you're doing. Very, very much interested in that. And I have to thank Sarah for inviting us to be here. So, gee. Um, and I don't know if it makes any sense for me to talk about something that I can't. Sarita Patel. Do you remember her name? Sarah? Yes. She sent me a little video yesterday. I put it in the chat. I'll put it in again. It says, "We are here." And when you watch this, and you'll see what the Charles Eisenstein is the author of the text behind this video, and he's one of the principal people. He's a revered philosopher among the Humanity Rising people, and so he published this little video, and I'm excited because we are here. It is us, and we are here. And well, I'm gonna send this to as many people as I can. So
Yeah, make sure it's in my email too. I would definitely. I've called restoration the great work of our time.
yes,
And a number of for several years, and I think we're done with consumerism. We're done with fossil fuels. We're done with domination, and we're done with male domination, not just domination. We're done with war. If we're unable to, the danger is that some people are for it.
Mhm.
I mean, the whole. I was trying to think of this, like when you go to college, like what's your major? I mean, like, is somebody going like, I think I'll major in arms dealing. Like, really? I don't think there's anybody who's doing that. I think that they're family businesses. I think this has been going on for a very, very long time, and I don't think you can go to college and study arms dealing. You're born into it, and I think we need to figure out and wage peace. We need to actually actively ensure, because we're not going to restore the earth unless there's peace. And this was one of the most interesting things that I heard Deng Xiaoping say in China. He said, we have to have peace. I don't know if you saw that back in the 80s, but we interviewed Deng Xiaoping for 60 minutes. Very interesting character. And, he said, we have to have peace. And this is such a strong thing to say, because I just hear these leaders saying, oh, you bad people over there, you bad people over there, we don't like you, or whatever. We need to actually have a different kind of conversation. And if we don't, then we get a predictable and a unnecessary and probably a catastrophic outcome. So
yes. Well, that's what Humanity Rising is all about. You just described it particularly, and we are working on that. And there's at least hundreds of us working on it. I have 500 people on my email list who come to the conversation group that I run after each episode of Humanity Rising. I have a discussion process. We call it the after chat, and these are the chat people. And Leo
Wonderful.
and Sarah are among them, and Robert is among them. I don't know the name Nancy Blackwood, but Sarah has lit a fuse here for an explosion in certain directions of consciousness, and I'm excited about it. So thank you for being here with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Mhm.
And I would just mention to whoever, Leo, or who sent me this about. Oh yeah, Leo. So Thomas Berry, that was definitely. I have the book, The Great Work, and I felt it was the great work of our time. But I didn't want to steal his title exactly. But the great work of our time is similar but it's really that we have to focus on restoring ecological function. And the interesting thing about working in ecological function is it changes us. So it means that we're not focusing on domination or mercantilism or corrupt economic theories or anything like that. We're focusing on earth systems. And those earth systems are working because of natural laws. And you can't break these laws. You know, if you break the natural laws, there will be drought, there will be floods, there will be famine, there will be, you know, all these things. These are not magical. They are the result of bad behavior.
You know, I would say that part of the problem is that the folks who want to continue exploiting use violence to suppress the opposition, to suppress the movements for life, the people defending life. And people know that. In fact, you might be aware of, uh, I think 50, there's, I think 250 people globally this year. I don't have the exact numbers. I know 50 people in one country in South America, I think it's Colombia, were assassinated for their environmental actions. And
Yeah.
I and just to so that's a problem. I mean, if people feel like they don't have anything to lose, then that's well, then we just and that's why these folks like Berta Cáceres in Honduras, her daughter is continuing her work, and her daughter has been threatened and attacked. Um, but I have a question for you based on your ecological understanding. Maybe and there are analogies to be made between the way life physically works on Earth and the way life works socially. And I think there are analogies to be made. Do you, in your experience, we see this? It's sort of a hardening, if you will, or a the folks who want to exploit are working really hard to do that. They're putting money into the right wing movements globally, and look at Bolsonaro in Brazil. So I'm just curious if in this maybe you can anyway. Does it ring a bell for you in terms of ecology? The this the social situation. I don't know if it's kind of a vague question, but I think you get the question. But it's
Well,
I'm not sure if I'm characterizing the situation
yeah,
thoroughly.
I think we have a lot of historical problems, and these historical problems are they're passed on from generation to generation, and they're not resolved. And so this is where the multi generational trauma comes in, and so it's affecting all of us. We're always heartbroken. We're always anxious. We're always uh, and I think there's also one other issue here. The social systems become norms. They become the behavior which is accepted. And so if you're not doing the normative behavior, it's that you're excluded from the main social group. So to be a subculture and to be in a different thing, it depends on how much you crave acceptance. But because sometimes it's kind of exhilarating to just not be in that hamster wheel of running around doing the things that we're told to do and socialized to do, but don't make any sense to us. And I think that the thing that I've seen is that it goes back to that who, what, when, where, why thing. Like, why? uh, why seems to be that we have created this economic world, and this we're not Homo sapiens, we're Homo economicus. You know, if you look at it this way, so we're trying to believe that materialism and mercantilism is an actual valid social organizational system, and you know, in the absence of another one, it's like, you know, people come in and they hand their money and they take their thing and they walk away, and they don't like usually shoot each other, and you know, but that's not a really very good way to organize society. So this social organization is, I think, can be done in many ways much better than that. And I think that there's one more thing. I'm going to have to go fairly soon, but I would just mention this. I think that we don't know what money is, and this is our one of our biggest problems. So if we were to look carefully at what is money, we would find out that, oh well, it's just a concept. It can be anything we want. It's been shells. Every currency that's ever existed over historical time has failed and collapsed, you know. So I think you should, that's a clue. You know, that's a clue. So, but what we should look at is, what is it that we think of as the economy? Don't listen to what is the norm, because the norm is serving those people who it serves, and it serves a tiny minority of the people, and the vast majority are trapped in a system that they can't escape from, or that they feel they can't escape from. And then there are outliers. I guess I feel like a sort of an outlier, because I've lived in privilege my whole life, but instead of living in privilege and saying, well, I want more privilege, I'm embarrassed by being privileged, because I've been to all these countries and I've seen all the suffering and all the inequities going on, and I'm kind of like an observer. So I'm not really a participant as much as I'm an observer of what's going on. And as an observer, I look at it and I go, well, that's just wrong. I mean, that's so fundamentally wrong. And if we were to look at this carefully, and now we are almost there, I think, because all the currencies that over historical time, they've all collapsed. And so we should be aware of what that means. That means the existing currencies are just concepts, and they can go away in a moment. I remember being sent to the Soviet Union, and you know, the idea that the Soviet Union is going to collapse, this juggernaut thing of, you know, like, what? You know, where's it going to go? You know, what's going to happen? Nobody, the surprise of this was like unthinkable. And it was really funny, because Francis Fukuyama immediately came out with that weird thing where he said the end of history, you know, now laissez-faire capitalism and participatory democracy, that's the epitome, you know, there's nothing more to learn. We've reached the, you know, we've beaten the Soviets, you know, the Soviet Union is now collapsed, and now we're in the golden age. And that, I was in Moscow, you know, things are falling down, and I'm coming from China, I'm going to North Korea, I'm going to America, Europe, and Africa, and South America, and I'm thinking, no, this is not better. This is devastating. This is like, now you have nuclear weapons proliferated all over here with no safeguards, we don't even know where they are anymore. You know, they're going to be everywhere. It's like, this can't be good. And it also was, my first impression was, oh, if the Soviet Union can disappear, that doesn't mean that the West is more secure. That means like the West could go at any moment. You have no idea what's going to happen. And so I think that's where we are. And if we were to create a financial system, an economy based on ecological function, this would answer all of our problems. We could have full employment, food security, climate regulation, weather regulation, hydrological regulation, biodiversity, everything we want. So I've been promoting that, but I'm like, you say I'm nobody is the reality. So,
But you're not. You think so, but you're not. You represent a certain mindset, and what our job, my job with other networks, is to bring the people together who understand what you're talking about. And the more of us that we bring together, the more likely we are to have a positive outcome. And yes, and you mentioned the collapse of the Soviet Union. We happen to know somebody. His name's Jim Garrison, who is the president of Ubiquity University, who was in charge. He was in charge of touring Gorbachev around the United States after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And he actually took Gorbachev to meet Nixon, and an interesting set of stories. Jim has a lot of stories. I think you would find he and you would have a lot in common. He was born in China as an American citizen. His parents were missionaries, and he was born in China, and he has traveled, and he has brought together, we're talking about the 800 to 1,000 speakers on Humanity Rising. It's mostly due to his Rolodex.
come on in. Sorry, someone has arrived.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Frank, it's Frank. Come on in, Frank.
Thank you, John. We can let you go for now, unless you want to say a few things.
Oh my gosh, I got a cat too.
Hey!
I got
Now-
a Christmas present for you.
I'm getting a Christmas present. Oh my goodness, where did that come from? Is
That was
pink?
the headline of the flyer. All we want for the holidays is a stable climate.
Lots of things in it. Inside I put.
Oh, thank you.
This is
Sage.
sunflower smudge.
All right.
Just a
So,
clear-
Sarah, why don't you stop the recording, and we'll.
Oh, yeah,
we'll go back.
right. Okay.
Yes. All right. Beautiful.
Uh,
Oh,